Hey, praise the Lord. How are you all today? Sorry, let me just put it. You good? Somebody still recovering from their illness? No, we're all healthy. Well, if you're still recovering, God bless you. God be with you. God is our tower of refuge and our strength. Today I'm very blessed. I can be here once again to share the words after, I don't know, a few months, I think. Hopefully not for too long, because we all need the words of the Lord, and it's the very thing that keeps us growing, keeps us knowing our Lord deeper and deeper, and probably one of the few things that could change our lives in this world. Because we can read so many books, we can gather so many wisdoms from people, but truly some of them probably comes or is our basis on the Bible, which is the word of the Lord. So today, I want to get straight to this, because it doesn't sound as scary as as the title says. I want to share something from what the world knows about Deathless Sermon. Now, I didn't come up with this title. The world did, or to be precise, the Baptist Church came up with this term. It is first actually inspired by a missionary called William Carey. So we probably all know this infamous person. William Carey preached this sermon, and out of it born the famous quote that we all know, which is, expect great things from God and attempt great things for God. Now, a bit of history background. After his conversion, William Carey realized that other people also need Christ. And so he worked strenuously to educate himself, and eventually he became a Baptist pastor. Now, later on in his life, he actually encountered a voyage log that belongs to Captain Cook, James Cook. Yeah, we all know, the one that the statue's being desecrated. That Captain Cook. And he thinks that those people that Cook encountered actually need Christ as well. And so he spoke up on behalf of missions to his church, which is something that the church didn't do much of at that point of time. Now, when he raised the point that we need to reach out to people, surprisingly, he met with a rebuke from his elder pastor. This pastor, or this elder pastor, says to him, "Young man, sit down. When God pleases to convert the heathen, he will do it without your aid or mine." So William, a bit taken aback, but he refused to back down. Right? He gathered all the facts, statistics, Bible commands, common sense arguments, a lot of things that will actually provoke and challenge the status quo of the church that opt to do nothing. So the result of his hard work is actually written in a book called An Inquiry into the Obligations of Christians to Use Means for the Conversion of the Heathen. I haven't read this book, and we are not going to talk about this book today. So, May 31st, 1792, at 10 in the morning, he addressed his fellow Baptists at the Nottingham Conference. He took the verse from Isaiah 54, verse 1 and 2. "Lengthen thy cords and strengthen thy stakes, for thou shalt break forth on the right hand and on the left. And thy seed shall inherit the Gentiles and make the desolate cities to be inhabited." And as he saw it, this was a challenge for a missionary work. It was a challenge of faith, and he coined it, or call it, expect great things from God and attempt great things for God. Now, his plea was put forward and eventually became the solution to form a Baptist mission society. And William Carey became their first missionary. This is an amazing thing. Now, sadly, there is no surviving records or transcript of this Deathless Sermon. But because we're going to read from the word of the Lord, I think we can still go back to Isaiah 54, the one that he talks about, and we can still recapture the meaning of this verse. So, without further ado, let's open up our Bible on Isaiah 54, verse 1 to 5. Okay, I'm going to read it out to you. My Bible is of NIV translation, so, if you encountered a few words that are different, that's why. Isaiah 54, verse 1. The title of the chapter is The Future Glory of Zion. Verse 1. Sing, barren woman, you who never bore a child. Burst into song, shout for joy, you who were never in labor. Because more are the children of the desolate woman than of her who has a husband, says the Lord. Enlarge the place of your tent. Stretch your tent curtains wide. Do not hold back. Lengthen thy cords and strengthen your stakes. For you will spread out to the right and to the left. Your descendants will dispossess nations and settle in their desolate cities. Verse 4. Do not be afraid. You will not be put to shame. You do not fear disgrace. You will not be humiliated. You will forget the shame of your youth and remember no more the reproach of your widowhood. For your Maker is your husband. The Lord Almighty is his name. The Holy One of Israel is your Redeemer, and he is called the God of all the earth. And that's the phrase of today. Now, obviously, the chapter goes a bit longer. It talks about God's mercy, God's peace, God's grace. But I want to focus on the first 5 because I think this first 5 has a lot to unpack in them. Expect great things from God and attempt great things for God. Now, if we read that chapter or that verse, I, for one, when I read it the first time, or maybe after the few times as well, it's a bit weird because it is more of an invitation just for the ladies. Yes? No? Disagree? Verse 1. Sing, barren woman. Barren means you're childless. Yeah, you're married, but you're childless. You who never bore a child, so man doesn't do this. So it's an invitation, but specifically directed to women, childless women. And what does it want her to do or them to do? Enlarge the place of your tent. So women were asked to enlarge the tent. And I thought, this is a bit weird. Usually, who likes to go camping? Someone goes camping? Who pitches the tent? The ladies? It's the men who pitches a tent. Now, let's put a bit of context about this verse because Isaiah were actually referring to a very unique traditions. Now, in ancient Near East, the patriarchs lives in tents. They are more or less like a nomadic tribes. So in the Bible, we read about Genesis 12:8. Abraham pitched his tent in the vicinity of Bethel. In Genesis 26:17, Isaac pitched his tent in the valley of Gerar. And Genesis 33, verse 18, also says Jacob pitched his tent before the city of Shechem. So the male actually pitched the tent. Now, if we wonder what tent looks like, it's probably a bit far-fetched from the tent nowadays where, you got the frames, you got the fabrics, you just open it out of the the back, and he just sprang outside. Oh, there you go, that's your tent, and just put the stakes on. Now the stakes part still stays, but a tent at that point of time was made out of a very large awning, like it's a sackcloth. It's very big, and they are held by poles. Not just one, because if you can imagine a tent or a big top, like when we go to saw a circus, there's one massive pole in the middle, and there's a big cloth just spread across, right? Now, tent at that age or at that time has multiple poles, so you can see or imagine that it looks like that. So it's a lot of poles. It's threads, and the ends of the cloth are drawn out by cords, which are tied to the pegs, like the stakes, and driven to the ground. So that part stays the same until now. The cloth itself is made out of black goat's hair. Yeah, it's very coarse and very heavy. But if you think about the purpose, ancient Near East, most of it are desert, and so it's very hot, and at night it's very cold. So thick cloth is required during the day to keep the temperature or shed them from the sun, and at night keeps them warm. Now, here's the catch. That's a tent, right? In those days, new tents are rarely made. They don't make new tents. The only time new tent is made is when a young groom and a bride set up a housekeeping for themselves in the different location from the groom's parents. Or in other words, if they have to move cities, that's when they pitch a new tent. In Abraham's, Jacob's, Isaac, and all those times, they don't do that. So they rarely split from their main groups. Like if we read in the Genesis, Abraham actually has his own family already, and then he went and saved Lot. And then Lot actually didn't go out and pitch his own tent. He actually joined Abraham's tent. Now, because they didn't make new tent, what happens when the family grows larger? Right? If we read Abraham went to war with 318 trained soldiers from his men. That's a lot of men. And so it makes sense that his family actually grows bigger. Right? If they don't pitch new tent, what happens when the family grows bigger? What they do in those times is, instead of making new tent, they extend the tent. Now this is usually done by, collecting the goat's hair for maybe about a year, and out of that, they make a new strip of cloth. Once they make new strip of cloth, this becomes the extension of the tent, and then that's how they grow their tent and space. Now, who did this work? In those times, women did this work. So men pitch the tent, and the one that extend the tent are the ladies. So if we know this tradition or this culture or this practice, naturally people can guess when they need to extend their tent, right? Because the ladies do it, right? And so a barren woman will never need to prepare to extend their tent, correct? Because the family just never grows larger. But this is what makes this verse very interesting, that God asks the barren woman, the childless woman, to extend their tent. Now maybe before I want to dive deeper into the callings, I want to go back and focus about this barren woman, this character. We all know the promise of the Lord to Abraham, that your descendant will be as many as the stars in the sky and the sands on the ground. He has a lot. But guess what? His wife is barren. Yeah? So if we open up in Genesis 16, 1-2, this story about how Ishmael were created. Now Sarai, Abraham's wife, had borne him no children, but she had Egyptian slave named Hagar, and so she said to Abraham, "The Lord has kept me from having children. So you go sleep with my slave. Perhaps I can build family through her." That's Sarah. A great contradictions to what God's calling. After Abraham and Sarah, they got a son called Isaac, because eventually in Genesis 21 verse 2, it says, "Now the Lord was gracious to Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised. Sarah became pregnant and bore the son to Abraham in his old age at the very time God had promised him." Isaac was born out of God's mercy, God's power. And then Isaac begot a wife named Rebekah. All right? If we open up Genesis 25, verse 21, it also says, Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was childless. And so the Lord answered his prayer, and his wife Rebekah became pregnant. So it's not just barren child from the age of Abraham, but his descendant got a wife from a different, like this is not a family tree from the same family, like they're not trying to keep the blood pure, right? Sarah was from, maybe Sarah and Abraham are close family, but Rebekah is already a distant family. Now Isaac and Rebekah had two sons, Esau and Jacob, and the chosen one is Jacob. And so Jacob got two wives, right? Because he was strict. So he fell in love with Rachel, but his father-in-law tricked him to marry the first daughter first, which is Leah. He didn't love Leah, but he had to marry her anyway to get to Rachel, right? So we can count Rachel as his wife because that's whom he fell in love with. Now, this is third line generation. Genesis 30, verse 1 says, "When Rachel saw that he was not bearing Jacob any children," she is barren as well, "she became jealous of her sister, which is Leah. So she said to Jacob, 'Give me children or I'll die.'" Right? Barren woman. And then God actually answered the prayer of Sarah on Genesis 30, verse 22. And then God remembered Rachel. He listened to her and enabled her to conceive. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son and said, "God has taken away my disgrace." Now it's very interesting that God promised the nation of Israel children that will fulfill the earth. But along the way, from the very beginning of the steps, everyone cannot bear any children. Sarah cannot, Rebekah cannot, Rachel cannot. And if we trace down up to the era of Judges, there were still wives that cannot bear children for her husband, but they are actually part of the Jesus lineage. And so these ladies were desperate. And bear in mind, in the culture of that age, childless women are considered undignified and or disastrous, right? So if we actually read the translation of New King James, I think Genesis 30, 22 to 23, Rachel actually says, "God take away my disgrace," but in the King James Version actually say, "She conceived and bore a son and said, 'God has taken away my reproach.'" And so she was the talk of the camp. Like the tent grows and grows. And so if we read the story, Leah actually conceived a lot of times. And even Leah's maid conceived with Jacob, but Rachel could not. And so she was the talk of the tent for sure, because that was the culture at that point. And now, so if we read Isaiah 54, verse 1 to 3, which is the current scope for our discussion, we saw this calling to enlarge the tent is actually a calling for people who are desperate, who are craving for the Lord, like, Lord, where have you been? Where is your promise? And we will learn about the barren woman in the history of the Bible. We know that the their childbirths are so significant. They are paramount to the history of Israel. Why? Because they reveal the work of the God and who He is. The first one is who God is in our life. Before we can expect great things from God, we need to know Him, right? Extend your tent and lengthen your cords is a calling to actually say that God will do great things through you. So we can expect great things from God. And all of this cannot be done unless we can see that God is great, who God is, and what He can do. Otherwise, we will just repeat the same mistake like Sarah did. Right? Sarah couldn't wait for God's promise to have Isaac. And so what she did, she asked her husband to lie with her maid. And out of it born Ishmael. And Ishmael got blessed because he's still the descendant of Abraham. But the chosen one is still Isaac. And they all quarreled until now. And so Sarah couldn't wait for God. He couldn't see that what God can do. And so she tried to solve the problem through his own ways. But this is a calling that for us, when we want to expect great things from God, we need to know who He is and what He can do. I want to invite us to actually open Ephesians 3:20. This is a very short verse, but in here, Paul actually says, "Now to Him who is able to exceedingly abundantly, above all that we ask or think, according to the power that works in us." So God is able to do exceedingly abundantly, above all that we can ask or think. So He is beyond our imagination. We can expect great things from God because He is amazing, because He is great, He's all-powerful. And guess what? Throughout the history of the Bible, He has changed or you turn the situations around. We can expect that God will fulfill His promise and God will actually reveal who He is. That's the first point. Now let's read on to go and the next one, which is attempt great things for God. Now, as I have said before, naturally, if you're a barren woman, there is no need to plan for extending tent because your family just wouldn't grow. Plus, to extend a tent, it is quite a lengthy labor. Like I said, you have to wait or collect the black goat's hair for about a year or so. If your black goat's sick or die because of famine or something else, diseases, then you gotta wait a bit more. Basically, it's not something that we just switch on and off. It's like, I want to extend a tent. Let's go to Amazon, buy the next cloth. It got delivered the next day because you pay for Amazon Prime. And then when it comes, like, hang on, it doesn't fit my size. I need bigger or I need smaller. Return. Send back to sender. So it wasn't that easy. They have to wait for about a year or so before we do this. And so, what do we need to have to be able to actually attempt great things for God? Because God actually say, hey, barren woman, extend your tent. Do they have the kids yet? No. Do they have the children yet? No. How would they have faith to go and extend their tent? This reminds me of Noah when he had to build the boat or the ark. Like, dude, there is no rain, and you're building an ark on the mountain. Everybody who built the ark was on the harbor or next to the sea, next to the river, next to the water at least. Some sort of water. Are you crazy? But in Noah's case, he got nothing to cover up for, correct? Noah just says, well, maybe my insanity and my pride is all that matters. But I built this for God anyway. I'm not, like, this is God's call. I'm not trying to cover up for my weaknesses. But for barren women or childless women, they have something that they can't really cover up, right? They can't say, oh, I'm expecting, so I'm going to work on extending my tent. Well, if you're expecting, it will show because you are a woman, right? It will show. And so, this call for a big faith to our God, that because He can do great things, we can attempt great things for God. And so when God promised for the barren woman is to have children that will take over the nations, the 10 expansion has to start now. Or in my project's manager's timeline, it had to start yesterday. It has to be finished tomorrow, right? There's urgency to this because when God says, I want to do great things to you, it will be big. It will be massive. Are you ready? Are we ready? Now, do remember, because attempt great things for God kind of anchor in us, like we have to do this. Don't forget that this still have to go back to our faith in God. In that Ephesians 3:20, that says He can do exceedingly abundant beyond what we can imagine. And so in other words, when we have great expectation, the great expectation necessitates great preparation. In our preparing something great to attempt for God, we have to have faith in Him that we do this for the glory of the God, not just for us. And great preparation is a lot of effort, like extending that tent. Maybe just draw an example. I like to swim because I have back pain. Maybe the like is ambiguous. Now, if you are a swimming athlete, I think late last year, I happened to swim in the pool next to our children's school. I just usually do it so that my back pain goes away. And then one day I met a guy who's actually swim very fast. Whoa, this guy, he's about the size of Peter. Yeah, that Peter. Not Saint Peter, that Peter. Only muscular, not round. This guy swims really well. And I can't catch up with him. He's so good. And then after a while, he noticed that I'm the one who can sort of match him in speed. Maybe less in stamina, but in speed. Only in speed. So he struck a conversation with me and said, hey, do you practice? Yeah, I do. I just do it out of, for my health benefit. I was like, did you practice for competition, for Olympiad or something? It's like, dude, look at me. Do I have like an athlete physics that can compete in Olympiad? And so I said, no, I just do it for my health benefits and yada yada. Normal stuff. And so I asked him, what about you? You look like you swim very well because I can't keep up with you. I was like, yeah, of course. I used to be under 21 national champion in Australia. So he swam very well. He trained very well. And you can see his physiques is way bigger than me. And then he said, oh, yeah, but then I got into accidents, and after a while, I can't actually swim. So he had to wait for about a decade to recover from his back injury. And then after that, nowadays, he started to come and go back to his hobby. So it's a bit of a painful experience of life with him. But the things I want to draw a comparison here is that there's a big difference in terms of preparations that we do. I do preparations just to keep my body healthy. And so I don't train as hard. I don't set the higher goal to achieve something bigger, because like my goal is, if I don't have back pain, that's a win. Yeah, that's a good goal. Because my wife always asks me, why do you keep swimming like every week? What are you trying to achieve? It's like, yeah, well, otherwise I either sit down and have back pain and I groan, or I go and swim, get tired, go home and snore. So it's different. But this guy, when he was actually in under 21 on the national championship, his goal is to actually win, right? So he has higher goal, and naturally he prepares harder. He trains harder. He prepares more. And so, if we actually see what sort of expectation we have, that will determine what sort of attempt and preparations we can have. And so, we can only attempt great things for God if we expect great things from God. If we don't expect great things from God, then our preparation will just be standard, normal. If we achieve it, it's good. If it's slightly beyond, it's a big win already. But we expect great things from God, our preparation needs to be even greater. Now the challenge for this ministry is really, when I think about this, expect great things from God and attempt great things for God, is that our capacity. If God were actually give us more souls today to look after, to nurture, to train, so that they can come to the Lord, do we have the time? Do we have the resource? Do we have the energy? Do we have the capacity, the skill necessary to actually achieve all that? That's the questions. Now the second one is that because our God is beyond our limitation, in attempting great things for God, what I realize is that we have to give it our all. Now in Isaiah 54, it actually says, enlarge the place of your tent, stretch your tent curtains wide. Now this is the phrase. Do not hold back. Do not hold back. Have no reserve. Put everything in. Because like I said, if we actually prepare for a children that will occupy the nations, we can't spare any of those boy goats' hair. We can't spare any courts. We have to give it all. Everything. Fully invested. And based on our preparation, how invested we are in our preparations, people can see whether our attempt is great or not. Correct? It's easy. Now, that's about expect great things from God and attempt great things for God. The next verse is very interesting because it says, do not be afraid. You will not be put to shame, and do not fear disgrace. You will not be humiliated. You will forget the shame of your youth and remember no more reproach of your widowhood. So the next things I want to convey is be fearless. This is not, how do you say this? This is not actually a call to be reckless, right? Like if we watch, typically I notice this in Michael Bay's movies. Like the main characters, I couldn't say he's fearless, he's more careless and reckless, but got lucky, and so he can save the day. But to be fearless is actually very, very challenging. Now let's put things under the context as well. This is still a call for the barren women. Something easier said than done. If we go back to that Genesis 25, sorry, not 25, Genesis 30, when Rachel saw that she was not bearing Jacob any children, she became jealous, and she said to Jacob, "Give me children or I'll die." And then, can you see the gravity of her plea? If Jacob can have children with her, she can have children with her other or his other wives or his wives' mates. But for the wives, they can't bear children with other husband or other men. All right, that will break the covenant. And so Rachel's only salvation, Rachel's only answer in her to not be a disgrace in his family camp is Jacob, for Jacob to give her child. So Rachel cannot plead this to any other person except to Jacob. "Give me children or I'll die." It sounds like a bit of a reaction, but well, nowadays maybe it is, but in those days, maybe not so much. And if we see Rachel's condition, there's a sense of futility in her life. Like, "Jacob, you're the only one that can save me." But if we read Jacob's response in the next verse, you actually say, Jacob actually became angry with her and said, "Am I in the place of God who has kept you from having children?" Well, basically, he answered Rachel, "What do you want me to do? What do you want me to do?" And before we actually say, "Oh, maybe it's Jacob's fault or it's the husband's fault," it's not, because Jacob had a lot of children with Leah while Rachel is waiting. So Jacob is angry and he said, "I can't do anything for you. I can't. What do you want me to do?" And so you can feel that Rachel's only hope in Jacob is shattered. He can't answer Rachel's hope to bear children. And if we have this sense of futility, like we in our lives, there are things that we cannot change. Things that we feel like this has been the thorn under my skin. I cannot get rid of it. And this prevents me from doing great things, whatever it is. And so we sort of repeat what Moses did in the past when he said, "Lord, I can't do this. I'm not good at speaking." When God called him to actually talk to the Pharaoh, right? Moses said, "I can't do good speaking." And we have our weaknesses as well. And sometimes, or most of the times, this weakness or limitations is what makes us fearful. We can't do this. We can't do that. God says, "Pitch your tent." I don't have goats. Maybe. I don't know. There's a lot of things that are beyond our controls. But I do understand this. We need to go back to that Ephesians 3:20. All things, or being fearless, doesn't mean we become delusional and we think we got no weaknesses. We can just plow through to the future. Or we whisk away all our weaknesses and we become strong, courageous. Not really. Our weaknesses will still be there. But we should actually anchor our hope in God. Again, God who is beyond our imagination. A God who can exceedingly abundantly do things beyond our ask and our hope. And so be fearless, again, should be anchored back to who God is. Do not be afraid. Your weaknesses actually will go away in God. Like what happened to Sarah, like what happened to Rebecca, like what happened to Rachel. And it actually very befitting in verse 5 when God says, or when Isaiah wrote, "Your maker is your husband. Right? Go back to Rachel's condition. Her only hope, her only salvation is her husband. But her husband says, who am I? Am I God? I can't bear you children if God says you can't. But verse 5 actually answers this very well. Do not be afraid. Why? Because your maker is your husband. In a sense, a husband that will be able to actually turn your weaknesses away and make it to be His glory. The Lord Almighty is His name, and the Holy One of Israel is your Redeemer. And so this verse 5 actually packs a lot of closure to the problems of expect great things from God and attempt great things for Him. Because in our weaknesses, in our futility, in our conditions that we can't do anything, it says God is here. God is here to deliver us, to redeem us, and He's called the God of all the earth. I think that's a very powerful verse if we understand the full context of it. Now, husband and wife is actually a very standard metaphor in the Bible. God wants a covenant with us, and it's often or mostly portrayed like a marriage. And close relationship actually underpins this covenant with Him. Because after all, to expect great things from God, we actually really need to know Him. And so this will be my last point for today. We have to know Him very well before we can expect great things from God. Now, when I wrote this last point, I said to God, what does it mean? I have to know you well before I can expect great things from you. Why can't I just expect great things from you from the beginning, even before I know you, right? And now, when I think more about this, I remember something that happened to me in my workplace. Now, let me tell a story from what happened to me. Not to boast, but to actually hammer this point in, that we have to know Him well before we can expect great things from God. In or throughout my career, I've worked with a certain group of people who actually like a comrade, like a brother at arms for me. So we stay late at night to deliver project deadlines. We argued a lot for like a week about software design, that he thinks needs to be delivered and I think is impossible to achieve. And then I commit code that, I built software that has issues, and he comes in and fixes it. And he did the same. I was like, dude, why this doesn't work? And look at it, it's his code. It's all right, I'll fix it. So we are actually brother at arms in our workplace. And then after a certain point of time, he knows my code, I know his code. So if you were given a code, I could just read it like a novel and it's good, right? I understand everything that he does or he tries to do. And then one day he got a job at the new place. So he moved out. Because he moved out, I'm left. I'm still in the old organization, my old workplace. He moved out. We continue our separate ways. We still talk, but we don't work together anymore. Now, as it happens, in this new workplace, he actually made a lot of achievements. Good things happens because his work is impeccable. Now, after a while, because he achieved a lot of good things, people ask him, hey, we're going to throw out more things to you because you did things very well, right? The price for your good work is more work. That's how the workplace works. So he got more workload, and he said, we need more people. We need to hire more people to actually cater for this. And so the very first thing that his manager asked is, who would you recommend? Now, if people wonder about interview process, it's all a fluff. if you want to get into a company, get someone who can vouch for you from the inside. It's all inside jobs, really. And so my friend actually picked this guy, interviewed him, and got him in. And so you can more or less guess what the interview looks like or sounds like. They don't grill me, I grill them. They don't ask me hard questions, I ask them for the tough answers. Can you do this for me? Because my current work doesn't allow me to do it. So it's like fluffy interview. Short story, I went in because I'm vouched by this guy, my old colleagues. And so in here we work together, and apparently his manager, who is 2 levels above my pay grades, noticed that the work or the projects that I'm put in actually accelerates a lot. And so naturally, this high-level manager nominates me for an award. Now, because it comes from 2 pay grades above me, everyone knows because it's broadcasted in the company's meeting. My name is up there, and it's like, this guy deserves nominations and awards, and everyone say, "Oh, you're great, awesome, you did amazing." So I got all the accolades, and I felt like, well, yeah, this is good. But then, you see, everyone that doesn't know me yet thinks I'm great. But my friend who knew me well, that actually vouched me in, he actually came to me and say, "Bro, you're a legend. Now tell me something new." This question will not come from people who don't know you. If people don't know you, they can say you are great. But for people who knows you, they will expect great things from you, greater things out of you. Because he knows, bro, you can achieve this. This is something that I know. We've worked on this together. We've delivered this together in the past. Now tell me something new. It's a challenge for me because now I want to expand more. And so if we tie this back to knowing God well, to expect great things from God, it actually is something like this. Not because I think your achievement now is so low, but because I know you can achieve this. This is great, of course, but I want to see great things, God, from you. And so I can't stop and think about, this happens about a year ago already, by the way. It didn't happen yesterday. It happened about a year ago. But these things rings to me until now. And at the start of this year, I keep thinking to my God, I look back to last year. Yes, we have up and downs, we have struggles. This ministry has struggles. But if I look at the good things, the things that you did for us, the things that I lived through in my life and see what you've done, it's all great. It's all amazing. And so I ask to myself, do I want to expect the same thing this year? And this event reminds me that say, God, I want to see great things from you this year. I want to see more because I know you're great. I know you can do amazing things. Now, because God has done great things, I can imagine what God can do according to my past experience. But God can do great things beyond our imagination. So it's only befitting if we actually go and ask God, God, I want to see more great things of you. I want to expect great things from you this year. And because I expect great things from God, I will attempt great things for God. And I pray that in our faith journey, may this be our calling as well. We know Him well, and we expect great things from God, because God indeed is exceedingly abundantly able to do things beyond our imagination. And with that, I want to close our sessions today. Let's bow our head in prayer. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for your work. We thank you that you call us out of our weaknesses and have faith in you, because you want to do great things through us, through the power that you have vested in us. We thank you because we are chosen to be part of this. We thank you because you chose us despite our weaknesses. And so we pray, God, here we are. You know each one of us. You know our strength, and above all, you know our weaknesses. You know our fear. The deepest things that more often than not prevent us from giving it our all to glorify you, to attempt great things for you. And so we want to pray, God, as a church, you are our maker. You are our husband. You are the one that could turn our weaknesses around. So help us to have faith in you. And we pray that we don't want to hold back when we want to attempt great things for you this year. Because God, we have seen how amazing you've worked in our lives, in our faith, in our ministry last year. And so may this year, our cravings is for you to show us more. It's for you to reveal more of yourselves, and for you to do even more great things through us. And so we pray, may your calling, may your words fall into our hearts, and may us nurture it so it can grow as a tree that bears fruits for you, that's pleasing your hearts. And above all, God, we want to continue to expect great things from you this year. And by doing so, we want to attempt great things for you. Thank you, Jesus, for this time, and thank you for your presence and your word once again. And in your name we've prayed.